Good morning, YouTube. Monday, 15th of April, bit after 10 in the morning. And a little birdie tells me that I should probably make some videos concerning New Scientist magazine from a fortnight ago, 30th of April. Every now and then they put out one that's really, really full of good stuff, juicy, and this is just such an edition. I have to share it. We have an illustrated editorial, a foretaste of a later article speaking about what a mess we're making in space. The British are getting worried about their National Health Service and what they're going to do to it again. Under the title, Energy Emissions Rise. Global carbon emissions from energy use climbed to a record high last year as demand for energy grew at its fastest pace this decade. The International Energy Agency, IEA, said this week that emissions from energy use in 2018 rose by 1.7% to a high of 33 gigatons. The increase is equivalent to the carbon release from all air travel doubling in a single year. This is the first official confirmation that energy-related emissions have risen 2 years in a row. It now seems that a plateau between 2014 and 2016 was a blip. Quote, one could take a negative stance and say we're doing everything wrong. I think it's not as bad as the absolute number suggests. It could have been higher, unquote, says Laura Cozzi, the IEA's chief energy modeller. Overall, the world's appetite for energy was up 2.3%, the biggest rise this decade, but switching from coal to gas power stations, which emit less carbon, helped damp down the emissions growth to some extent, while nuclear power also had a good year as new plants came online in China. There was strong growth in renewable energy sources, which met 45% of the increase in electricity generation in 2018. But the speed of change isn't enough, says Cozzi. We are putting the accent on the right policies, but they are not going strongly enough, unquote. Glenn Peters at the Centre for International Climate Research in Norway estimates that based on economic growth predictions, total carbon emissions will rise again in 2019 by around 1.5%. Crashed jets lack safety upgrades. Yeah, back scroll my videos and check out the notice to airmen regarding the Boeing 737-89 MCAS system emergency procedures. Tough times for Britain's insects. A third of wild bee and hoverfly species are in decline across Great Britain, raising concerns about decreasing biodiversity and the potential loss of pollinators. An analysis of 700,000 naturalist records going back to 1980 has found that about 33% of 353 species studied had declined in the extent of their range across the island. The grey-banded mining bee, pictured below left, is among the losers, down 38%. By contrast, the common carder bee, below right, increased its range by 82%. The assessment found that the key group of 22 wild bees and hoverflies for crop pollination had been doing relatively well. Overall, 11% of the species studied increased their range between 1980 and 2013. That is no reason for complacency, though, says Gary Powney at the UK Centre for Ecology and Hydrology. It's a risky pollination strategy to rely on just 22 species. Again, if you go back into my video upload scroll, you can find, not long ago, I posted a video about the last equinoctial swarm of midges. And on Friday in the supermarket, I was talking to a bloke who has the mail contract from Glen Innes to Emmaville to Deepwater back to Glen Innes. So he probably does 150 kilometres a day or something, 120. And I said to him, how often did you used to clean your windscreen of dead bugs? And how often do you clean it now? And the answer was 2 years ago, every day you had to clean the windscreen because view was impeded. Now, once a fortnight. He does his mail run 5 days a week. Okay? the insect density in the air mass around the roads here, and that's a forested remnant, is 10% now of what it was 2 years ago. Some people have suggested to me that it's the temperature because of the drought, and I've shown that around here we've had 3 degrees of global warming measuring December 2007 compared to December 2018. On the other hand, we missed out on 275 millimetres of rain last year here. That's 34% of the expected average rain. So maybe the soil is so dry that any insect eggs that are being laid in the soil are just drying out and dying and they're not hatching. I don't know. But yeah, I'm glad they've still got 22 species of pollinators in Great Britain, because I don't think you could say that here. Talked to another bloke Saturday night, mentioned this business about the insects, and when was the last time you had to clean your windscreen? He said, oh, just a couple of days ago because I ran into a swarm of bees. Okay, so the apiarists are still at work. Right, back to the magazine. First all-woman spacewalk axed because they didn't have 2 medium-sized spacesuits so that 2 women could wear them and the blokes wear bigger spacesuits. Security flaws in government websites. News and technology pits artificial intelligence against a parrot. Magnetism aids search for water on Mars. Polar warming may make smog pollution worse. Milder conditions in the Arctic could be weakening winds in China and India, making winter smogs worse. Burning fossil fuels can result in severe clouds of pollution in many cities in Asia, including Beijing and Delhi. These smogs, aerosols of fine particles, are worse in winter, when more fuel is used for heating and weather patterns that can cause dirty air to linger tend to take hold. Chuanfeng Zhao at Beijing Normal University in China and his colleagues wondered if rising temperatures in the Arctic affect this. Going back as far as 1980, they compared the monthly average temperature of the Arctic with atmospheric aerosol levels of the Northern Hemisphere's mid-latitude regions, where many industrialised cities are. They found that when the Arctic had a particularly warm summer, aerosol concentrations in East Asia and North India tended to be higher than usual the following winter. This could be because warming conditions in the Arctic reduce temperature differences in the Northern Hemisphere. The result may be a weakening of high-speed winds that normally blow eastwards. Less pollution could then get dispersed, causing aerosols to build up in some areas. Big mountain ranges, including the Himalayas and central China's Qingling peaks, may block airflow further. Zhao says his team's work should enable governments to predict smog levels based on Arctic temperatures, quote, so they can come up with better mitigation plans, unquote. But Tim Garrett at the University of Utah says the study only shows that Arctic warming and smogs are associated. It is unclear if one leads to the other. Meanwhile, Arctic sea ice probably reached its maximum extent for 2019 on the 13th of March. Initial measurement puts this at 14.8 million square kilometres, the joint 7th lowest figure in the past 40 years. Scott Pearson's measures a toe bone from the heaviest ever land predator. They found a T-Rex that's 400 kilograms heavier than any T-Rex they've ever looked at before. Space rocks reveal surprises galore. People are getting excited about what the asteroids are made of. Bennu is bumpy. Ryugu is dry. While MU-69 resulted from a slow collision. Diversional therapy for geeks who don't want to get their head around the fact that global warming has already won. We're not ever going to go and live in space. We're not ever going to go and colonise Mars. Gene screening for disease risk. Anika Lucasen at the University of Southampton, UK, thinks these risk scores could help identify high-risk groups and play a role in targeting screening for diseases, but she says it is unclear what people given such a score should do with the information. We tend to assume that picking up something early makes it more treatable, but sometimes there is little evidence for that assumption, and the downside of overdiagnosis is often ignored. That seems to be a bit of an own goal. Google is going to launch a video game service, burning fossil fuels for the fun of it while the Earth burns. LIGO returns to probe black holes. The Laser Interferometer Gravitational Wave Observatory in the US made a huge splash in 2016 when it announced the detection of faint ripples in spacetime produced by the collision of black holes, a pair of black holes. It has since spotted 10 more gravitational wave events. Now, following upgrades, LIGO should see one a week when it starts up again on April Fool's Day. We're making the transition from having a slow drip of events to opening the faucet. Meanwhile, air pollution may reduce sperm quality. Dirty air in urban areas may be having an impact on human sperm. A study shows that mice exposed to tiny pollution particles have worse sperm quality and make less of it than mice that don't breathe these particles in. Many health problems are linked to pollution emitted by petrol and diesel cars, including respiratory issues, cancer, and stunted development in childhood. However, whether the smallest of these air pollutants, those less than 2.5 micrometres across, known as PM2.5, could also contribute to increasing male infertility rates around the world is still unclear. Elaine Costa at the University of Sao Paulo in Brazil and her colleagues studied 4 groups of mice. The team exposed 3 of the groups to PM2.5 for different portions of their lives. The 4th was exposed to filtered air. Costa's team analysed sperm development when the mice became adults. There was a deterioration in the tubes in the testes that produced sperm in mice that had been exposed to PM2.5 compared with those breathing filtered air. And the quality of sperm was worse in mice exposed to pollution before and after birth. Exposure to air pollution after birth seemed to have the biggest effect on sperm. DNA tests also showed the changes in activity of the genes related to testicular cell function. Quote, "These findings provide more evidence that governments need to implement public policies to control air pollution in big cities," unquote, said Costa in a press release. The work was presented at a conference of the Endocrine Society in New Orleans. More work needs to be done to understand any link between poor air quality and infertility in men, says Frank Kelly at King's College London. While animal studies are useful in examining any underlying mechanisms, the results seen in mice don't necessarily translate to the same effects in humans, he says. Exoplanets for life in short supply. Kepler 452b is the only known exoplanet that might host life. As we know it, Scotty, as we know it. Child abuse brain linked to depression. A study of more than 100 people's brains suggests that abuse during childhood is linked to changes in brain structure that may make depression more severe in later life. Nils Opel at the University of Munster in Germany and his colleagues scanned the brains of 110 adults hospitalised for major depressive disorder. The team also asked about severity of their depression and whether they had experienced neglect or emotional, sexual, or physical abuse during childhood. Statistical analysis revealed that those who had experienced childhood abuse were more likely to have a smaller insular cortex, a brain region involved in emotional awareness. Over the 2 following years, 75 of the adults experienced another bout of depression. The team found that those who had both a history of childhood abuse and a small insular cortex were more likely to have a relapse. The Lancet Psychiatry, doi.org/C3R9. This, quote, "This is pointing to a mechanism that childhood trauma leads to brain structure alterations, and these lead to recurrence of depression and worse outcomes," unquote, says Opel. The findings suggest that people with depression who experienced abuse as children could need specialised treatment, he says. Brain changes can be reversible, says Opel, and the team is planning to test which types of therapies might work best for this group. And by golly, by gosh, we're getting close to the upload limit. So, what do you reckon? Start a new video? Oh, okay. Take the bloody lot, will you? Woohoo! Get it while the going's good. And now, of course, you reckon it's your turn. Don't you just love it when the wildlife decides to take a hand in the circularity of the narrative of the video that one is making? I'm going to take that as a win for the theory that you're supposed to live in harmony with the ecology. And I'll end this video here, and I shall return with more from New Scientist. Warbles not a lot to YouTube. Ciao.